Now, one of the things I like about Millway in particular is they're a company that is always refining and improving their products. And so on the left side here, I have my original, this is the first generation of the street plate for the F2x, F3x that they made. And here's the replacement plate on the right, which is obviously the latest generation or latest version they have here in 2024. And there are some differences. Now, a year ago, I did a video on what are some of the latest generational updates they did for 2023. But even beyond that, it looks like there are some more for 2024. So let's start by looking at the improvements in the camber slider assembly. As I highlighted in my video a year ago, they've changed the bolts up here from a little like 5mm hex to a much beefier T45, so you don't have to worry about stripping these out. You can see there's a little bit of the metal that has started to strip around the top from just when I've been using it. And then going inside the camber slider itself, they've now added this washer. I think it might be like a thrust washer for the top of the polyurethane. I'm not exactly sure why they've done it, but there must be some improvement in why they added an extra part and therefore added extra cost to the design. And then looking at the polyurethane itself, you can see from the hit that I had on that pothole, it actually managed to deform this polyurethane pretty well. But it was weird, or interesting rather, looking at these, because you can kind of see there's a thickness difference. The newer one is thicker than the older one, and the older one is somewhere around like 7.4, 7.5 millimeters in thickness, and the new one is 8 millimeters, which is the exact same thickness as the lower polyurethane piece, and the lower polyurethane piece over here is also 8 millimeters. So I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think polyurethane is really supposed to compress and stay compressed. So I honestly don't know if this started off as 8 millimeters and just through the load of things over time got compressed down, but I'm inclined to think not really. One of the other interesting differences is if you look at the mounting plate or washer that the strut actually goes to. There are actually quite a few differences here. The first being, as we're looking here, just the overall thickness of the main cylinder. This guy is about 9 millimeters from bottom to top, and the new one is 14.5. And so you can see there's a lot more lateral support within the polyurethane of this mounting washer. And so that should help it resist tilting, kind of like I'm showing here. So keeping the shaft more vertical within the polyurethane. I don't know what feedback or testing motivated that design, but it's interesting nonetheless. And then also when we look at the outer diameter of this, it's kind of gone in the opposite direction, where this was wider overall than the new piece. So this flange has more support from the polyurethane on the bottom and the top. The newer one has less. I'm not exactly sure why they did that. It's an interesting design though. And this old washer has an outer diameter of 39 millimeters, and the new one is only 37. Even with this 39 millimeter outer diameter, you can see that when centered in the lower assembly, there's still like 1.5 millimeters gap between the edge of this plate washer and the actual metal housing of the camber slider. In the original design, they didn't want this to be touching, so there's no chance of like rattling. And I haven't heard of people having a rattling issue before, but with the new one, they basically added another millimeter clearance on either side. So now instead of like 1.5 millimeters, you have 2 millimeters, or sorry, 2.5 millimeters before this thing can start contact. And actually, it never gets the chance to contact. You can see here with that inner wall, because really it's down here on the underside where it would touch first. And since the outer diameter of this cylinder down here didn't change, and so this clearance didn't change, I'm really not sure why they would have reduced the flange diameter up here, unless it's just cost savings because they can use a narrower diameter stock or something when they make this. Moving to the lower camber assembly, I honestly don't see any changes here. You can see they're still using helicoils for the threaded holes that the top clamp bolts are going to go into. And you can see on my destroyed one down here, here's the helicoil that pulled out of one of these guys over here. This bolt's still in here because the head snapped off of it when I hit that pothole. But yeah, no changes to the lower camber slider. When we get to the actual camber plate bodies themselves, there have been some more changes. If we look at the original design, all the way up through last year, on all of the mounting points that connect the camber plate to the top mount, there's a helicoil insert. And the original camber plate like this, they supplied some cap head screws or bolts to, clamp that. Then sometime last year or maybe late 2022 instead, they switched to going to studs. But whether you had bolts or you had studs, there was one failure mode that I saw, particularly with older 3-bolt top mount cars, and that was with these M8 fasteners. They couldn't handle the increased torque spec of a 3-bolt top mount, and also the increased load from a 3-bolt top mount. And so I've seen a few cases where these helicoils would actually strip and pull out, and then people just had really bad clunking noises with these camber plates. I never saw that with a 5-bolt, but I guess it could happen as well. So anyways, what did Millway do for this 2024 version? Well, you can see obviously there are steel inserts now instead of the bare aluminum threads with the helicoil, and those inserts extend, you can see them, they're pressed in from the back side. And it's also interesting because notice these two are flush with the surface of the plate, and these 3 are not. They protrude to give you more thread engagement on those particular studs. Although I don't think you really need it because the studs that they provide are like all the same length, so I don't think it's even going to protrude, that you're not even going to get the stud threaded into this that far. But this is a much better design. Obviously this is not going to strip and pull through, and should be sufficient, more than sufficient, for those 3-bolt older top mount cars. Also, another change they did is where the stock strut brace mounts to. If we look at that, we can see that the older version is decently larger diameter than the new one. I mean, thread-wise, they're still both the exact same M10 thread, but the older one is definitely larger, and even looking at how it presses in from the back, you can see its flange on the backside is quite a bit larger as well. This was probably just a cost savings measure. Functionally for us, I don't think it'll really matter. So, I guess kudos to Millway for cost optimizing their design or rather shifting that cost from parts that don't matter as much to areas that may matter more. One of the other benefits of these steel inserts on the plate versus the old helicoils is how much easier it is to install the studs into. Now, these helicoils, they always had a lot of resistance, and like by hand, you can see here, this is as far as I can thread the stud into just by hand. So to do any further, I'm either gonna have to take pliers or something to grip the stud and turn it, or use the double nut method, put 2 nuts in here, tighten them against each other, so that then I can use a wrench on those nuts to tighten this in. But with these inserts, it's so much easier. I can just do this by hand, as you can see, screwing it all the way down nice and easily. One of the interesting things is also, just because in the nominal variability or normal variability of these studs, you can have a case where one protrudes a little bit beyond the bottom of the insert and plate. And well, you don't really want that, because as your camber slider moves, you don't want that like grinding against the plastic thrust bearing. If you're not dialing in that much camber anyways, you may never even reach here, so it might not be a consideration. But what this also allows you to do is this allows you to easily back off that stud a bit, so that the bottom is flush with the plate before you install everything. And if you're wondering, like, well, if I leave the stud loose here, isn't that going to cause an issue? It really won't, because when you put the nut on the top and you clamp it, the nut is pulling up on the stud, trying to pull it up kind of out of the plate. And that tension will actually keep the stud in place. and you can still tighten the nut without, turning the stud more in the insert on the plate.